Bears Squad Show. Joe George, post-game host. What can the Bears build off of after their Week 3 victory?
Taylor Dahl here. I know we're going to give a lot of love to Caleb Williams and the offense, deservedly so, but let's give some flowers to the defense too.
And maybe some good Jaylon Johnson injury news, not out for the whole season after all.
Bear down, Chicago. It's the Bears Squad. Everything Chicago Bears, every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the Windy City. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. From Soldier Field to the next great chapter, the Bears Squad Show starts now.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Bears Squad Show. Joe, Taylor, and Lauren here with you. And guys, we finally get to do one of these after a Bears victory. It's so much better to do this than what we've had to do the last 2 weeks. But the vibes are good. Everyone in Chicago got their hot dogs today. The line was long. It was crazy seeing all the videos coming out because Caleb Williams threw 4 touchdowns. But the vibes are obviously just much better around this team after the victory over the Cowboys versus what we saw the previous 2 weeks. And there's a lot to get into. We'll talk about what we saw from that game, what we think can grow over next week versus the Raiders. We'll preview that game later in the show. We'll talk about Caleb Williams, the defense, and potentially a return of Jaylon Johnson this season. But let's start with what the Bears can build off of the most. Taylor, we'll start with you. What did you see, watching back the game of what you saw from the Bears and their victory? That, yes, it's the Cowboys, but this is a building block that we should expect to see to continue to get better the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of the things offensively had to do with timing. I mean, when you're talking about the timing of Caleb's throws and some of the issues that we had seen, and we're going to continue to talk about the accuracy, and there's still some moments that, you want to see a little bit better of a ball. Lauren, I think week 1, we were talking about just seeing the progress in that accuracy and seeing less of the bad throws. And I do think that we saw that, yes, against a not very good Dallas defense right now, but I still think that's buildable. I think the more comfortable that Caleb feels in this offense and the more that timing with these wide receivers, and you saw it with everybody this week. You saw it with Zacchaeus, you saw it with DJ, you saw it with Luther Burden, you saw it with Rome. So all of the weapons, Komet and Colston, pretty much everybody, you saw some moments with between them and Caleb. So I think to me, that feels like the most buildable thing, not only just Ben Johnson getting creative and doing some fun things and it working, but also the timing between all of the weapons. And that's something that you want to see. And I don't think we ever saw the full comfortability hit last year at all.
Yeah, and that feels like something that is independent of how bad Matt Eberflus's defense is, right? Like, yes, having a bad defense makes it easier to get there and show us that, but like timing is timing, whether the player is wide open or tightly covered. The ball's kind of got to go to the same. You want the ball in the same spot either way. Obviously, you can get away with more if he's wide open, but like when you're hitting the player in just coming out of his break on the out route, whether the cornerback's draped all over him or not, there's a spot you want to put it, and the fact that he's able to do that shows you that it's all about, the player and the receiver having built that, being less about, well, the defense was and the coverage was so bad. So for me, I'm with you there 100% that like that stuff feels really sustainable, especially on those deep throws, the things that he just hasn't been able to really connect on, like whether Rome Odunze is wide open or whether there's a guy trailing him in coverage, like you got to still hit him in that same spot. And that feels to me like he might not have as many opportunities to hit those deep shots because of offensive line won't be as good every week. But when he does attempt those deep shots, I think there's a trust that they can be a better, more consistent timing downfield.
Yeah, I think when we talk back, think back to the offseason, right? When you're talking about operation and all these things that, guys getting taken off the field during training camp. And it's something that it's gotten better each week. It's just the timing of everything from the play getting into Caleb getting the ball out quickly. It all looks so much better, just 3 weeks into the season. And we've seen, I think, baby steps of that in the first 2 games, but we really saw a leap in this one. And again, I totally agree with you guys. That's something that is, you can replicate every week. It doesn't matter the quality of team you're playing. You can do that against the Raiders. You can do that against the Washington Commanders, after the bye week. You can continue to add to those things. So that to me is I think that's a great one to start with, Taylor, of what you can build off of from this last game. Lauren, what's one thing for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, I saw defensively, and I know we don't want to, we can jump around a little bit here, but like the Dennis Allen getting a little bit more creative up front and finding more ways to generate pass rush. I think he blitzed a little bit more than we saw in the first couple of games. I think we saw them change alignments a little bit more than we saw in the first couple of games. And I wonder, I don't think it's just Dennis Allen remembering how to do that. It's like guys getting a little bit more comfortable in the scheme to be able to say, okay, I can ask more of them and put more responsibility on guys' plates than maybe I felt like, the first couple weeks of the season. Let's keep it a little bit more simple because everyone is still learning and we got to see how this goes. And of course, going against like Kevin O'Connell offense and even, what the Lions have got with John Morton in Detroit, like they're still smart offensive coordinators and smart quarterbacks. And Dak Prescott's a smart quarterback, but I'm not sure that Schottenheimer is the genius offensive coordinator that's going to be able to outsmart Dennis Allen. So I think there was some ability there to say, hey, let's do a little bit more and get a little bit more creative and attack a Dallas Cowboys offensive line that I think was a little bit weaker than maybe we anticipated and generate a pass rush in ways that we weren't fully expecting.
Yeah, that's one of the things, honestly, I noticed too, Lauren, because when you go back and you look at the percentages, the rotational percentages of especially the edges is what I was looking at. Because when you go to week 1, it was a lot of Montez. Obviously, he's going to be out there a ton. And it was Dio Adengbo a ton too. It was those two guys. I think it was like almost 90% and then like over 70%. It was a lot different this week. And I think that worked. I think that one of the things about Dio, and if you've followed him at all in his career or watched anything, the rotational part, when he's asked to do that, he can be successful. Asking him to be a full-time guy hasn't really ever worked in his career. So I think what Dennis Allen is kind of realizing too is, yes, the creativeness is nice. Maybe these guys understanding the playbook a little bit more in his defensive scheme, that helps. But also I think keeping that rotation and keeping those guys fresh benefited them a lot this last week, because it did feel like they were just completely wearing down that Dallas offense by the end.
Yeah, I think even on the interior, like obviously Javonte Williams had some success early in the game, but I felt like we just saw a better performance from the interior defensive line as well. And also with the defense, the guys who stood out like Noah Sewell, I think he really flashed again watching the game back, especially early in the game. Like I want to see just even more of him. He is someone that looks like could be a solid find, for this front office that can contribute to this team. I think for me, the one thing I'm hoping is the biggest building block, honestly, from the defense is what we saw from Tyreek Stevenson. Mm-hmm. I mean, the way he played, being all over the place in this game, the strip was incredible. But he's not going to do that every week, right? You're not just going to take it from a guy like it's candy, but which was great. Like you have to, peanut punch it a little bit more often than that. But I hope that's the one that it's not maybe a guarantee that it's going to continue to have, but as long as, we have to wait for Jaylon Johnson to return and Kyler Gordon to return to this team, that level of play that we saw from Tyreek, I'm hoping that can really continue to be a part of this team on a weekly basis.
Did you hear his comments, press conference, I think was Monday, when he was asked about, like what was working for him this week. And he said something that I thought was meaningful to say that this is going to be sustainable success, but also I think raised a secondary red flag we'll talk about too. But he talked about how, like there was a couple like zone concept things that he just was really having trouble like getting and understanding. And he said he put in a bunch of extra work and preparation and extra film time and got there early. And like, it really kind of clicked for him and he started figuring out and he could play a lot more loose and confident in it, which sounds great. And it sounds like he kind of worked through some sort of wall or barrier there, but it also feels like it took till year 3 to discover that more preparation and extra film work is really important and good. And I wonder, like, better late than never, but like, why A, did he not figure that out, or B, was there not leadership in the coaching staff or the locker room to like teach him and show him like, hey, this is how hard you need to work to be this successful in the NFL? Because I mean, I probably could have told you that's what you needed to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for Tyreek, it's always been interesting, even from the beginning, because he's always been kind of handsy, and those PIs, the DPIs have been a thing. And that was one of the biggest conversations when he was coming into the NFL is he going to be able to control that? Because it was a problem in college. He got called on a lot of holdings and defensive pass interference. And so that was one of the things. And so I wonder sometimes if how much obviously college and pro being very different, some of these guys who it's kind of easy for them in college, it takes them a couple years to be like, oh, I can't just play the way that I did at Miami and it's going to work and being the NFL. And I think that there were moments on Tyreek, especially late in his rookie season, where he was playing really well. And I think it might have been a thing where he was kind of like, oh, I've got this figured out already. And then last year happened and Hail Mary happened and things got messy. And obviously we know there was a lot of bad coaching decisions and or lack of coaching happening last year on honestly probably both sides of the ball. But so I wonder how much it was like a mental thing for him, to your point, Lauren, where he did have to just kind of break through that. And the last couple of years, he didn't have those coaches being on him. Like, you need to fix A, B, and C, and you could be a really good corner. They were just like, you're doing a lot. And that was Eberflus. Like, we did a lot of good things. It just didn't work in the end. And it's just like, no, like you're the coach. You've got to coach these guys and let them know that when you're making a mistake. And that's the best thing about Ben Johnson right now, is that's why I want him to yell and scream and get mad and be honestly looking angry on the sideline. When the flea flicker worked, he was still looking like he was like, no, it wasn't supposed to go that way. But I think that's a very beneficial thing. And I know we were talking a little bit after week 1 when we were saying that, when, people were kind of like, okay, do you think this is going to work with Ben Johnson because of his reactions? This is why I think it is, because I think some of the players on this team really needed that hard coaching for things to kind of get aligned for them.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, when I heard Tyreek say that, it's just like, kind of an epiphany a little bit of like, well, maybe Caleb wasn't the only one that felt a little ignored by the last coaching staff. Because I feel like if Caleb felt that way, it does start at the top, right? Like, you would assume like it's an Eberflus thing. Like, I know they tried to show in Hard Knocks, like they were going to be meeting all the time. But when Tyreek said that, I was like, like maybe there's just something to this. Like, it was a more of a larger issue for the Chicago Bears than we realized. And only really Caleb Williams is the one who's kind of publicly acknowledged that that's been an issue for this team, was the individual hands-on coaching last year.
Well, and I think last year, Tyreek Stevenson would have been a bad messenger of that message. Like if he was the one coming out saying that, like after the whole Hail Mary thing, like no one would have wanted to hear from Tyreek Stevenson that, the coaching staff was the one letting him down, because he was the one who needed more of the individual accountability there. So it's nice to see. It just does feel like this took longer than it should have.
Yeah, I think the next one for me is just in terms of building from what we saw in this game, was something you kind of mentioned there a little bit too, Taylor, was just the involvement of the weapons. I mean, seeing Luther Burden be an active part of the game plan, Colson Loveland before he got hurt. I know Cole Kmet only had 1 catch, but for the touchdown in this game, that to me is where I think what we saw in this game, that's also you can replicate going forward. You can add this to this offense to use the skill you have. I mean, I was looking back at the 3rd and 4 reverse play they ran to Luther Burden for the first down. Like, feels like you're using that guy's speed to get to the edge, like what took so long in a way, but it's just everything was working. So I think that made Ben Johnson feel like he could open up the playbook. But I hope that also, can, and I think it should continue, and I think it will continue actually, really for the Bears as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really hard for defenses to game plan against that many weapons. And I feel like it's deja vu, because we said similar last year, and then obviously things didn't pan out that way for multiple reasons. But it does feel like when you're talking about Rome and Caleb's connection every week, you feel like is getting stronger and stronger. And that's something that a lot of people felt in moments last year, just never fully opened up. And now it feels like, okay, Rome is here, and that's what you've been waiting for. And he's doing everything that you knew he could do. He's beating guys. He's breaking ankles every single game, but he's also getting the contested and battling when he needs to, and that was his strength in college. So I think that Ben Johnson, when you have all these different type of weapons that can do different types of things, but also ones that can do multiple things, like a DJ Moore, it's going to be so hard if this really starts to, if we're talking about those building blocks, if this continues to build in this offense and they get more and more comfortable with Ben Johnson and Caleb continues to progress, it's going to be really hard to defend the amount of weapons and ways that Ben Johnson can use all of these guys. I don't think he had a better run game in Detroit, but he didn't have the weapons the Bears do right now if they continued what they're doing.
And to your point, like to tie those both together, like the running game hasn't been where it needs to be at all. And he's still been able to find a way to execute an offense at a pretty high level. And I think that's one of the things that also feels like something you can build off of is like they haven't been able to get the traditional handoff to the running back ground game going, but on that, 19 play drive where they ran it 11 times, like he found a way to manufacture a running game in other ways with a Luther Burden handoff or Olamide Zaccheaus handoff, or obviously we've seen a lot of DJ Moore in the backfield, but even like the Caleb Williams read option plays, like there was one where he's got Caleb, reading with Swift, and he pulls Darnell right to follow the quarterback, not the running back, like pulls to the quarterback side and like getting creative in plays to just, all right, the running game's not working the way it's supposed to. Let's find other ways to draw this upward. It doesn't have to be trick plays per se, but just like a ground game that eats clock, even though it's not 2 yards from DeAndre Swift and 3 yards from Kyle Monangai over and over again.
I think it's very funny how he said he didn't realize he called 11 straight run plays. So
He's like,
they blacked out a little bit.
I mean, I love it that you don't abandon it either, because I think a lot of coaches, the way that the run game was not working the first couple of weeks, they would have started shying away from that a little bit more. And that just shows that if Ben Johnson can start to worry teams at all, that he can manufacture some of those runs and people have to worry about that too, then that's even more of, just that in his pocket. Here's another thing that I have.
And I would bet some of that answer for him of not knowing they called 11 in a row might be a result of, I haven't gone back and rewatched, looked at this closely in those 11 straight plays, but I would bet at least one of them was an RPO where Caleb could have thrown it. So in his head, it's not necessarily like purely, he's not looking under the run category on his play sheet, or here's all run plays, but plays that maybe could have some pass elements to them that ended up being run. So I imagine that's part of why maybe he wasn't as clear on, I guess it turned out to be 11 straight runs, even if it wasn't maybe 11 straight purely run play calls.
All right, we'll take our first break here. We haven't really talked a ton about what we saw from Caleb Williams, obviously, in this game, but we'll hit on that next here on the Bears Squad Show. Today's show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5 Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What I love most is how portable they are. Big taste, tiny shot. You can take it anywhere and get that boost when you need it. Look, I am a big-time 5 Hour Energy guy on Tuesdays. We got long days at the office for my radio gig, and then we're doing these Bear Squad shows. So 5 Hour Energy absolutely helps me get through the day. Enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade in your 5 Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love, or be bold and try something new in store and online at www.5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. All right, so I think there's been a lot of, if you listen to the Caleb Williams conversation this week, I think some of it's, rightfully so. It's the Dallas Cowboys. They gave up 400 passing yards to a quarterback that today got benched for Jackson Dart. But then Caleb throws 4 touchdowns against them, and I think it still, checks some boxes of what you wanted to see. So, Taylor, when you go back and watch this game, what's your biggest takeaway or thought from what you saw from Caleb in week 3?
Yeah, I think part of it is what I was saying is also my building block, and it's just the timing of a lot of things. I felt like the first couple weeks, there were a lot of moments where you felt like it was just that tick too late, some of the throws, or that tick too early, some of the throws. And because of that, we are seeing, some of the drops we were seeing, or the overthrows we were seeing. The one, obviously we're going to talk about the flea flicker. I'm sure that's the highlight that everyone keeps playing, but it was beautiful. Like the way the ball landed with in Luther Burden's hands, and you were in stride, and everybody's been talking about that deep pass and his struggles there. We saw several down the field this week, and they all looked, not saying every single pass, but the ones especially that turned into touchdowns. I think all of his touchdowns were 10+ yard throws. So that's something to me that makes me really excited, because I think what we've seen the last couple years, which coming out of college, Caleb Williams, everything was saying, like, can he play in structure? That was one of the biggest things. Is he going to hold on? He holds the ball too long. That was another thing. He could throw. His deep passes weren't an issue in college. It was a lot of the intermediate, the midfield stuff that he struggled with. And I think we've seen some of those things be successful this last couple of years. And so for some reason, the deep pass, the last year was the problem. And maybe even the first couple games where you were like, why can't he really get that to click? And then now you are. So now you're seeing him kind of start to play in structure when he needs to, but also take off when he needs to. And you're seeing him, some of those deep passes start to settle a little bit. And so I think all of the things that you're saying, here's the problems of Caleb Williams coming out of college, what's fixable and what's not. He's kind of showing you that everything's fixable, and everything, at least with the right coach, seems like it's manageable and he can handle it. And I think that's a positive thing. There were so many comments before we drafted Caleb of, he doesn't know how to play in structure. Everything's chaotic. Everything is going. He was under Lincoln Riley, and they don't know how. Like, everything he did was just in a world of chaos. And we've seen him kind of settle down a little bit. And I heard Ben Johnson, I think it was today, or maybe it was yesterday, where he was just talking about some of the pre-snap stuff before the play starts that he's been really impressed with Caleb Williams. That's a positive too, because just in the Ty Dunn article, they talked about how last year they had a dumb things down. And I've said I don't totally believe that, but that he wasn't able to do a lot of the pre-snap stuff being asked about, and he wasn't being able to audible when things weren't going right, and it was kind of chaotic behind there. To me, it seems like he's starting to really grasp some of those things, and that to me is the progress that anybody could have asked for within 3 weeks of a new offensive coordinator again.
Yeah, it's really that balance between structure and out of structure that is so critical to all of this, and it feels like it's syncing up really, really nicely. Like that was kind of the whole thing, was like you give Caleb Williams rules and structures that he can work from, and that should be 80+% of the offense, and he can make it really easy for him. And then on the plays when that structure is broken by a blitz or coverages guys or an offensive line failure or whatever it might be, that you can trust Caleb Williams that when the structure is broken, he can make something from it. And in last year, that was so often the only offense was, well, there's no structure, so he has to break it and try and make something happen all the time, and that wasn't sustainable. But you don't want to clamp that all down either. And so it's been about trying to find this perfect medium mix of like a lot of structure, but not too much structure, but not no structure, and some freelancing, but not too much freelancing, but not zero freelancing. And I think this game felt like they really kind of found that mixture of when to follow the rules and when to break the rules.
Yeah,
I think that's
his blitz numbers are the prime example of that this week. Like what he did, Eberflus tried to get, because the week before and probably the first 2 weeks when he was blitzed, that was an issue. And then this last week, they both 2 of the touchdowns came when he was being blitzed. So that is some of the positives that you don't want to lose of Caleb.
Yeah, I think the overall, like we saw things where it's just like, okay, like it's there. And it's fun. I was watching the games this weekend, and I don't know how you guys will feel about this, but I did feel like just like watching like all of these Lincoln Riley quarterbacks in the NFL. And I was thinking about, after watching the Caleb game, like, okay, it took Baker some time, like, and he's figuring it out. It's taking Kyler some time. Like, I think these guys, like, there's a reason why they all won Heisman's. There's a reason why it's also taken them all like a little bit of time. Like what Lincoln Riley has done is it hasn't really translated immediately to the NFL. And that's where I think there's been too much quick to judgment, specifically outside of Chicago, obviously from people that want to just dump on Caleb. And, there's things that people just don't like about him, and they're never going to like about him either. It doesn't help. But I think we saw a lot in this game where, like for me, it's the burden throw that put them into the red zone where he layered it between a couple guys. Like that's the throw that I'm like, okay, that is a throw that is not easy. It's not just whipping it down the field or throwing it 100 miles an hour like he can. Like he had to layer that ball into the perfect spot. That's something we haven't really seen from Caleb at all in the NFL. So that was one for me. I was like, all right, I like what I'm seeing from this guy.
Yeah, and I like too that there's still even more we can look for from Caleb, right? It wasn't like, oh, this is as good as it gets. This was peak Caleb Williams. It's never going to get any better than what we saw against the Cowboys. And that was a 4-touchdown, almost 300-yard game. And it's like, no, he can still be even better. I mean, he still one-hopped a couple of short passes at receivers' feet and overthrew a couple guys here and there. And obviously it wasn't that often, didn't happen a ton, didn't ruin the offense. But like you look at this game and go, oh, well, yeah, he could have had easily over 300 yards and could have had even more big plays to be there for this offense, that we can still see further growth beyond these really great steps he already made.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to Tom McManus. Obviously, he used to play in the NFL for a little while, and he was saying today, and he was kind of nitpicking at his Kmet touchdown, and he was like, I don't know, Kmet kind of had to like get up to get that one. And I was like, if we're in a world right now where if I'm nitpicking the touchdowns, I'll take it. I'll take it any day.
Yeah. I think it's one where, I mean, yeah, it's a little high. Like it's a little high, and yeah, I mean, look, it's we don't want to ignore that. DJ is wide open, Rome is open, Luther Burden, it's a trick play. But it's the longest throw of the NFL season at this point. That play was remarkable. Like just seeing Caleb flat-footed. You didn't really see that in real time, but like when you see it now from like the camera angle that's just focused in on him as he's throwing the ball from the defensive side, you see how he's really just, it looks effortless of him just throwing that. That to me is why that throw is so impressive, because it didn't look like he had to put all of his might into that thing.
Yeah, 62 yards on it flat-footed is insane. And anybody you would talk to would say that. That's not an easy thing to do. And that was one of the things, and I've said this before, Caleb will train in the offseason here with one of the guys that I know closely that works with me at 1010. One of the first things he ever said to me that offseason after Caleb was drafted, he was coming here and working, he was talking about the velocity of his ball and how no matter like I was trying to remember the exact speed because I don't remember. I'm not the quarterback guru that he is, but he was just talking about the speed of Caleb's balls and the way that they come out. He's never seen anything like it. And he was like, it doesn't really matter. I've never seen a guy who it's like 55 miles per hour if it needs to hit this, however long the distance. Now you got to be careful with that because you don't want those ones coming out as stingers when they're like 10 yards away. And I do think we've seen some of those the last couple of years. Sometimes maybe that velocity is even too quick when it's those short passes and you don't want to do that. But he has all of the arm talent in the entire world. And I think that pass showed that. I mean, he didn't have to use much arm strength, it felt at all, to get it all the way down the field.
And to be able to do that, you mentioned flat-footed, but also just like the chaos of everything that was happening in front of him. Right? I mean, the lob pass from DeAndre Swift when DeAndre Swift was hit and the ball was like, and to like catch it, turn, flip, and throw with the poise to generate that much power still, and to not be affected by the heat or the pressure of the guys bearing down on him. Like, there's everything about that play is super, super impressive. It just all comes together in a way that can only get you super excited about what the future might hold.
I don't think I've ever seen a play where, even though I know the result, every time I watch the highlight, I get a little nervous still as the ball is like flying through the air. Like, I'm still like, oh, that's not a good toss from DeAndre Swift at all. It's such a bad throw to him. So yeah, that's a great point, Lauren. Like, to stay composed in that way. Lauren, you mentioned things to still work on. What did you looking back at this game, what do you see from Caleb that you're like, okay, this is still a work in progress here, but maybe there were still positives within the game?
Yeah, so I think one was the little inaccuracies we talked about, missing plays, and Taylor mentioned the nitpicking the touchdown to Cole Kmet, right? Like, there's always little things you can dial in from an accuracy standpoint, and then I still think, as good as the offensive line plays, I think sometimes he's still a little bit skittish and will leave a clean pocket a little bit earlier than he needs to, and it certainly wasn't holding him back enough in this game. But like one of the scramble plays, like he can hang in the pocket a little bit longer, and he just kind of decided, well, I'm going to take off and kind of extend this, and those kind of things can get you into trouble against better defenses, but obviously wasn't a problem at all against the Cowboys.
Yeah, I think some of the things with Caleb, the accuracy you want to continue to see improve. That's going to be a conversation, just because that has you are seeing it getting thrown at the feet, and you're seeing some ones where the guys really have to get up in the air, and eventually you want those to kind of settle down a little bit into where the receivers, you don't want to constantly be like, wow, that was an amazing catch by so-and-so. You want the throws to be talked about more, and what a perfect throw, and in the basket, and all of those terms are ones you eventually want to start using more and more. I think we saw some of those in that game, and you're talking about the Luther Burden one and kind of the midfield in the red zone. That was one of the ones, but I do think some of the football decisions is some of those things, and I think the leaving the pocket's one of those. This game you didn't see too many mental errors, but I do think this year you have. And against defenses that are better, and the Lions and the Vikings defenses obviously are better. And I think those mental errors kind of affected him a little bit more in those two games. I don't know if it is he's just wanting to make play that hero ball and get out of the pocket and make something big happen. I hope that Ben Johnson continues to reel that in a little bit. You don't want to lose it, like you were going on, Laura. Like, you don't want to take away everything that's Caleb Williams, but you also sometimes do want to be like, relax. Like, we put a lot of money into this offensive line and a lot of things. Let's trust them a little bit. But it's hard to do that too if you are getting worked the way you were the couple weeks before that. But for me, it's nothing big. I don't feel like I'm watching him. Even the week before when we got smoked by the Lions, I wasn't leaving that game saying this is Caleb Williams' fault. I think there was definitely some things that he needed to improve on. But I also say you're 3 weeks into a completely new offensive scheme that everybody said was going to take time. And it looks like he's catching on pretty quick.
Yeah, I think to nitpick another one would be, because I think Rome's taken a lot of grief for the drop that he had in the red zone. That when you see, I mean, it's a duck coming out of Caleb's hand. Like, that's one where I think I'd like to see that ball be put in a little bit of a different place, where Rome's not up in the air getting hit like that. The ball comes out cleaner in that moment. That's another example where I think Caleb can be better. Do you guys take, because it's the Cowboys, how much does it hurt, like, your evaluation of what we saw in this game? Because there are a lot of defenses that are frankly just as bad as the Cowboys, or like maybe not as bad, but like the Raiders aren't exactly, crushing it. They gave up a ton of yards to Marcus Mariota. Like, I don't think it's going to be that much different this weekend. I mean, even the Commanders were getting torched by Geno a little bit in that game. So I don't personally, I think that, it outweighs it, it weighs it down a little bit, but it doesn't take away from everything for me. From what we saw from Caleb in the offense this week.
Yeah, I think the area that I'm most concerned about, not sustaining it is just with the offensive line and the pass protection. Like
Mm.
there's going to be others. I think these weapons are going to be able to get open against a lot of secondaries, and Ben Johnson runs route concepts that help get these guys open. Like it's not so much like, wow, look at how many times guys were open downfield. It's more like, look at how many times Caleb Williams had 3 to 4 seconds in the pocket with no real pass rush coming after him. Like I think Max Crosby this week, and the Bears are going to play a lot better pass rushers, and the Cowboys were particularly bad in that specific department. And I think we got false improvement from the offensive line, but not false improvement from Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I think for me, if anything, I look at the first 2 weeks and I'm kind of, as much as you didn't want the games to go the way they went. You don't want to blow the lead you had against the Vikings. You didn't want to get smoked by the Lions. But I think there was a lot of things that the offense was able to learn from those two defenses, because you are facing two of the, when you're talking about the Vikings pass rush and the way Brian Flores blitzes and everything he does and creates all of these pressures and sacks and all of those things. But then you're against Aiden Hutchinson the next week. And so I think that it might have almost been beneficial for them to have those 2 games to start the season and be like, okay, this is what we are going to have to face at times. There are going to be defenses that are going to be able to take advantage of our offensive line. What can we do from those? And obviously you want it to be better than what it looked like against Detroit. But I also think the defense is just as much to blame in that loss as the offense was. Honestly, you can't allow 50 plus points and expect to win many football games. And then you have this kind of like take a step back and look at Dallas and say, yes, they don't have Michael Parsons. What did this look like with? I don't want to know what it looked like if Michael was out there, but I do think you're looking at this defense that's like, it's a coach who's familiar with Caleb, and Eberflus said that, like, I know his weaknesses, I know his strengths, I can take advantage of those things. So you're talking about a defensive coordinator that is very familiar with how to take advantage of Caleb and a lot of the issues that the Chicago Bears have offensively. And it didn't matter. It didn't matter whatsoever. Maybe all of the Trayvon Diggs, there was a moment Rome rocked him on the 1 touchdown. He was just like on all 4s on the ground. I was like, that is not a good look for Diggs. But I think there's issues defensively for them. But I also think that the way you look at these 3 weeks are that week 1, you barely lost, and it was against a very good defense, and there was some good things you took out of it. That next week, it was a revenge mode from the Detroit Lions, and you saw they just beat the Ravens, by the way. So you can talk about however you want about what people thought about Detroit. They're still a good football team. And then you got to kind of like take a breath a little bit against Dallas. And honestly, the upcoming games, a lot of them, I feel like you can take a little bit more of a breather and maybe just continue to work out some of the bumps that you've seen. But I feel like it almost was beneficial to go up against 2 of the more difficult defenses that are also familiar with you to start the season.
Did you guys have any enjoyment watching it, be against Eberflus? Because it seems like there's a lot, like Dallas is they're crushing him this week. I had to flip on a little sports radio just to hear what it's like, and they're not, very well enjoying it. I've seen some local sports radio hosts in Chicago kind of dancing on his grave a little bit and being very excited about what they saw. But did you feel any enjoyment watching Matt Eberflus's defense get cooked a little bit by Caleb Williams?
I mean, as far as Bears coach villains go, he's a little bit lower.
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean, I'm not, I'm not team Eberflus, but I don't know. Like, it'd be different if their defense had been playing well and then the Bears smoked him. That's a little bit more of like, oh, like that's the enjoyment. But like when they're already struggling last week against the Giants, and now it's just like getting embarrassing for him. Like, I'm not saying I felt bad for him, but it just. You don't get as much pride when like, well, everybody's beating up on him, so you're just part of the group.
Yeah, it's funny because I think like there were moments with Eberflus that I almost felt bad for him in certain times, but then the way that last year went and some of the things that I heard after the season of just how dysfunctional things were, and it didn't really feel like, it took too long, in my opinion, for a lot of changes to even begin to happen. And then you go to the Thanksgiving game and it all just started piling up so much that the frustration with him, like, why didn't some of these changes start to happen earlier? Why weren't conversations happening? We're talking about Tyreek Stevenson right there. Like, why wasn't it being talked about of watching more film or doing this and this if you knew that was something that was going on? And so that's it more so to me is I don't hate Eberflus. I'm not like, oh, I rub it in his face type of thing. But I do think it's kind of satisfying to see like, okay, look, this is all week. Everyone's like, it's going to be a shootout because the Dallas is going to score a ton of points and the Bears are going to score a ton of points. And it was kind of fun to be able our defense to come up big. It was more of that than even Caleb going against Eberflus. It was almost more so like what the defense were able to do, missing Kyler Gordon, Jaylon Johnson, and TJ Edwards to the Dallas offense. I felt better about.
I totally agree. I think there's a lot of frustrations that happen. And I think that Tyler Dunn article, I think he even no commented on. So it's not like he's in there, dragging Caleb through the mud. And if he wanted to, he probably could, to be honest with you. So I don't think there's much satisfaction. And it's a great point, Lauren. Like he's low on the villain totem pole of coaches. That might be a bye-week conversation coming up here of a power ranking of or maybe a Mount Rushmore of the Bears coaching villains in the bye week. All right. When we get back, a surprise potential return for Jaylon Johnson, because it didn't feel like that last week when we did this show that Jaylon Johnson could be back for the Bears this year. That certainly has changed. We'll get into that next year on the Bear Squad Show.
The Bears Squad Show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So if you want to place a $5 bet on this Bears-Raiders game, right now the Bears are 1.5-point underdogs on the road in Vegas. The money line is Bears minus 106 if you want to bet on them to win straight up. And the over-under point spread total is 47.5 points. So a $5 bet on any of those or any other game, any other prop bets, any other sports, you hit that first $5 bet, you're getting $300 in bonus bets in addition to the winnings from your $5 bet. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
All right, so Ben Johnson this week confirmed that Jaylon Johnson could return this season. I use the word could. I think he said should, because I do think there's a scenario where the Bears season doesn't go in terms of them being an ultra competitive team throughout the entire year. And I think you have to evaluate if it's best to put Jaylon Johnson back on the field. If you're 4 games below 500 when he's clear, like, is it really worth it to potentially risk further injury for the following season? But were you surprised, Taylor? I mean, when you heard this news and just your overall thoughts on it?
I mean, I feel like the whole situation honestly was a little confusing for a bit because it didn't seem like it. The vibes all felt like Jaylon wasn't going to play, but then they weren't even putting him on IR to begin. So a lot of people were confused about that. And then you hear it, the injury stuff is so difficult, especially when you hear certain, like you hear core muscle and you're like, okay, you've heard different lengths of time for that. But then right away, the report came out talking about if it is this specific one and he could get this specific surgery, then here's, it seems like this season. So I was a little surprised, I think mainly just because it seemed messy in the beginning. And it reminded me a little bit of last year. Obviously different injury, but with the Jaquan Brisker thing where it just like they weren't putting him on IR, and then finally they were like, okay, he's going to be out for the rest of the season. I was feeling that coming. I was feeling like we're going to test this and let Jaylon stay for a few weeks until we hear the unfortunate bad news that he's going to be out. And then I thought we were going to get that news. So I'm pleasantly surprised. But I think to your point, you don't push it if you don't feel like he's impacting something that matters this year.
It just feels strange that I don't remember what his contract is, but a multi-millionaire NFL cornerback, like that it takes that long to get the necessary medical opinions to figure out what's going to happen here. Like I would think, if you're looking for a specialist doctor to come take a look at it and get opinions, but like I would think he might clear his schedule a little bit for a client of this nature. And maybe they're just a bunch of high profile athletes that all needed to see the doctor, but it just feels weird that like it takes that long for them to go, okay, well, we got the medical opinion. Now we want this other doctor to look at it for surgery. And now, okay, if we're going to do surgery, then we're going to put him on IR. He might be able to come back. Like that just feels like something that in 2025 should be able to be figured out a lot sooner. And I'm surprised it takes that long to get there, but I've been equally surprised that they still up to this point have not added another cornerback to the roster, despite Jaylon Johnson going on injured reserve, whether he's going to come back or not. Like they still have 6 guys, but it just feels like with Kyler Gordon hurt, it really has 5 guys, and I don't love the depth that as it stands.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point because I think regardless of when these guys are returning, I would like to see the Bears add to the cornerback room still. Like, I think the popular name I always see pop up is Stephon Gilmore. I think he's still sitting out there. But I'm like, he's had some good moments still recently. But like, he's a little. But is he worse than what you have? Probably not, to be honest with you. Like, is he better than Deshaun Wright? Like, I think so. But like, it's a low bar to pass, to be honest. But like, so I would like to see the Bears add to this room, especially like while they look better. It's still, this is where CeeDee Lamb being out, I think it can blind you a little bit. Like, it's the offense is one thing, but CeeDee Lamb is a different monster. Like, against this defense, like, what would he have done in this game? How are you going to handle, your upcoming game versus the Raiders and the Commanders and things like that? So I'm with you there, Lauren. Like, I would like to see the Bears, because of the depth, I would like to see them add to this room still while you wait the return of these two guys.
Yeah, I think I was shocked too that they haven't added anyone. I think to your point, kind of though, it's who do you add? Is there someone worth it to adding to this roster where you do feel like they are improving, because you don't want to just do it because you can. I'm really waiting for Kyler to come back. I feel like that's also one that I do feel like changes things. And I know it's just the nickel corner, but the nickel corner in a DA defense is very important. So I do think that already shifts some things. I think the development that we've seen in the past from Dennis Allen and the corners, maybe that's why maybe they've kind of had this mindset where he's been able to turn some very below average corners into at least decent ones in the time that but it just takes it takes more than 2-3 weeks to see that happen. But I don't trust this defense against some of the offenses coming up with what we've seen, at least out of the first 2 weeks of the corners.
And to your point, Tyreek Stevenson has got a lot better already in 3 weeks. Like, there is some immediate precedent here of like, okay, maybe they can figure some things out, but at the same time, we can't necessarily count on Dennis Allen to make Stevenson and Deshaun Wright and Alex McLeod all better corners
at one time.
As far as alternative goes, I know you guys were briefly chatting about this before I jumped on before we started, but like, I do wonder about a player with a skill set like CJ Gardner-Johnson in free agency. Obviously, locker room challenges are part of that conversation, but he was a nickel corner for Dennis Allen initially in New Orleans. And you wonder, certainly while Kyler Gordon's out, he could be a significant upgrade there. And then maybe even once Kyler Gordon comes back, is your best secondary having Gordon on the outside and Gardner-Johnson on the inside. And you could also use him in that third safety role in the dime package that they're currently using Jonathan Owens in. Like, it just feels like there is some talent potentially available. There are a couple other Dennis Allen safeties are sitting out there if they want one, like Marcus Williams or Von Bell or Marcus May. I'm not sure that's a perfect solution, but if this isn't good enough, it's something to try.
Yeah, CJ Gardner-Johnson is an interesting one. So I guess for people who are maybe listening to the show for the first time, so I host a drive time show on ESPN 97.5 in Houston. So I while watching the Bears every week, I also watch the Texans. And he's had some flubs, but he was ultimately cut, it sounds like, because he apparently was questioning another player's contract verbally. Of why is this player making this much money and I'm not getting to play in the role of blitzing and challenging DeMeco Ryans on the scheme that the Texans are running? Because on surface, I'm like, yeah, I'd like to see him as a Bear. I like to see what can he do to this team having that weapon like what he did in Philadelphia. I think the question is it a fit? And that's one thing with Ben Johnson that we don't know. Like, we don't know if he'll take risks on players like that. Frankly, I think it's worth it. Like, if he was willing to come to the Bears, I would sign CJ Gardner-Johnson immediately and just see if there's a chance of, hey, it was a bad situation in Houston. They're 0-3. They had playoff expectations. It's not going their way. Maybe we can get him to buy in here. And if he doesn't, he costs you like $250,000. Like, what's the big deal?
That one would be hard for me because I can't stand him as like just his personality. It's just not something that I like or like to cheer for. But I mean, I feel like that's one of the things that I may have to just kind of like do one of these and be like, if it makes the team better, just let it happen. But I do think, to your point, that the familiarity with Dennis Allen, if he's already screaming, hey, blitz me, let's like that is something that we have been saying we wanted to see a little bit more out of Dennis Allen, and maybe Dennis Allen doesn't feel like he has the manpower to do that as much as he wants. I think this last week when we're talking about the defense in general, and I said in the start, I wanted to like give some of the flowers to the defense, because I know we've been talking a lot about Caleb and the Ben Johnson play calling and all of the weapons and stuff like that. But I mean, multiple turnovers. We talked a little bit about the Tyreek, but Tremaine really kind of, and I feel like that always happens with Tremaine. Like anytime he gets one, there's always like one very close after that he gets again. But yeah, I think everything, you were getting some pressures. I know that the sack, it's not like you were getting like 6-7 sacks, but you had a couple sacks that you felt like you were actually getting pressure on Dak and multiple guys. Dom Robb was getting some pressure. You saw Javon in the middle, which last week I was just saying, like, I want to see more out of Javon Dexter because I know it's there somewhere. This game, I felt like Javon played so well. And I'm like, this is exactly what I've been wanting to see. And that's how Dennis Allen defenses function, is when you have that interior pass rush and you have guys that obviously in the back end that can kind of create other pressures. And so I do think defensively, maybe he's just having to get extra creative and that will take some time. But a guy like CJ Gardner-Johnson definitely isn't making the defense worse unless he's just throwing tantrums and fighting people, because we've seen that. But
yeah, I did someone in the YouTube comments to mention he did play for Ben, or on a Ben Johnson team. I forgot he was a Lion in 2023.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot about that too.
Yeah, so I think like if the Bears were to sign TJ Gardner-Johnson, it would be because both the head coach and defensive coordinator knows exactly what it would take to manage this personality in this locker room, and they would have comfort with it, right? It would feel even lower risk knowing that those guys already know what they're getting into, as opposed to, pick a random team, bringing them in and saying, oh, we'll figure it out. Like, no, this is we know what he needs or what he wants or how to manage this personality. And I will say, I think it makes a big difference that the Texans, like you said, are 0-3, that like with players like this, it feels like winning is always the cure. We don't hear a lot from Tyreek Hill when he's on a winning team, but when the Dolphins are struggling, he quits and is a big locker room pop. And the same was true for T.O. and Chad Ochocinco. And I know those are wide receivers, but I think the same trend generally applies, that like troublesome player on a winning team usually kind of keeps their mouth shut because they don't have anything to complain about because they're winning.
Yeah, you got to convince Ryan Poles now to overlook the character things, but maybe Ben and Dennis Allen could do it.
Yeah, I think to Taylor, what you were saying too about the giving flowers to the defense, I think Edmonds was a great point. He was not just the interceptions, but like Noah Sewell, he felt more of what you paid for, like this weekend. He felt like he was just more all over the place. He was around the chaos that we saw. I mean, it was nice seeing, Dominic Robinson get his first sack since 2022, Montez Sweat getting his first of the season. That's where I think, going back to the building blocks too, is can there be something with the pass rush? Not just, we talked about Dennis Allen, the scheme, but can this be a confidence boost for them that they can actually get after the quarterback this season?
You hope so, right? Like it has to be something that they need guys to ascend and keep getting better. And you hope that with the progress that Javon Dexter has made, I mean, he's top 5 in pressure percentage this season among defensive tackles. Dominic Robinson flashes, Austin Booker coming off injured reserve at some point in the relatively near future. Like, as much as we look at like free agent upgrades that could maybe help the secondary, there's not a pass rusher out there that's going to come in and really solve anything there. You're not going to find a Trey Hendrickson or a Micah Parsons. So like, this is the group of pass rushers that has to be better and has to keep getting better. And it's going to be a really good measurement of this coaching staff and their real merit of like, do we see that actual tangible player development because Dio Dengbo is in that same category of like younger player who we need to see improve from their first game to their 18th game, even if there's bumps along the way.
All right, we'll take our last break here. It'll be for YouTube, it'll be about 5 seconds. When we get back, we'll preview the Raiders game this weekend. All right, so the Raiders gave up 41 points to the Washington Commanders. Kind of a mix and match of where Mariota threw for a touchdown. He rushed for one, big rushing touchdown as well, punt return for Washington. But they scored in pretty much every which way they could against the Raiders. Now, Geno Smith did have some success with Trey Tucker, and Jacoby Myers had a solid day as well. So my view of this game, guys, is it's like Cowboys light. Like in a way. It's the defense is not good either. The offense has some guys that I think will challenge the Bears defensively this weekend. So that's why, in terms of building towards things, I do think this is another one where if we see the defense revert to the previous week versus the Lions versus the Cowboys game, would be a little bit concerning. So, Lauren, we'll start with you. What are your overall thoughts on this game and how the Bears get a victory and move back to 500 this season.
Yeah, this feels like a game that is easy to assume is really easy because it's the Raiders and because it's Geno Smith and Pete Carroll and they haven't been that good this season. But I also think it's a game that the Bears match up poorly with the Raiders or well from a Raiders perspective, where it's like Raiders have really struggled to run the ball with Ashton Jeanty this season, but the Bears run defense has been pretty bad. And this feels like the kind of game where Raiders are looking at it saying, oh, they're going to get the running game going this week so that then Geno Smith doesn't have to do so much and that the offense can take it a little bit easier there, given how every team has been able to run on this Bears defense. And I think similarly, the Raiders defense can finally get that pass rush going a little bit more than they've gotten it because Max Crosby can have a better matchup with a Bears offensive line than he's had in other games this season. So it worries me a little bit. I don't want to call it a trap game because you got a bye week on the other side, but it feels like the kind of game that is easy to kind of get lulled into oh, you just beat out on a bad Cowboys team, so now you're going to beat up a bad Raiders team. And it's well, I think the Raiders match up. I don't think the Raiders are a good team, but I think they match up better for themselves with the Bears than what Dallas did.
Yeah, I think for me, the big thing is going to be able to continue to stop the run. I think last week we talked a little bit at the top when Javonte Williams started where you're like, okay, this may be a long day. They were able to reel that in a little bit, especially compared to the 2 weeks before that. So I think that's going to be one of the bigger things and bigger focuses this week because Geno also had, I think, 4 touchdowns, 4 picks. He's turned the ball over several times. So that's something that I do think the Bears defense can take advantage of when it comes to kind of forcing some of those turnovers if they can. And so I do think the Raiders are going to want to lean on the run because they're going to say, okay, we saw the Bears the first 2 weeks and what the running backs were able to do on the ground against this defense. But I also do think that we've seen the guys in the middle start to get a little bit better. And we will see if that was just a Dallas thing or if that is something building, if we're talking about building things moving forward. But I almost feel like the Raiders are going to have to come in this and say, we have to run the ball or this isn't going to work. And so I do think that's something, but to Lauren's thing, it almost mirrors the strengths and weaknesses on each side of the ball kind of mirror each other. We've had those struggles defensively when it comes to running the ball. You've had those struggles and some of those deep shots that I feel like Jared Goff could pretty much do anything he wanted against the secondary. And if Geno Smith can start taking advantage of some of those, it's going to get ugly. But I do also think that offensively, I do think the Bears offense can really get things that they did against Dallas and do kind of run similar ways and figure it out. Granted, we know Tom Brady was just on the call. So how much are they going to even want? How much is he telling them behind the scenes of what to look out for and what not to look out for? But I do think I hate the word winnable. I hate when people say it's a winnable game because it's the NFL. And I think that every week you can lose and anybody can win. You just saw the Browns beat the Packers, and that's something that most people probably wouldn't have put their money on. But I do think there's a lot of things that the Bears can take advantage of against the Raiders. But to your point, Lauren, I think they're probably saying the exact same thing.
Yeah, I think the one thing this weekend that I don't expect to be the same is Braxton Jones, no pressures allowed. I don't expect Max Crosby to go out there and get dominated by Braxton. It'd be awesome. I mean, that would be the surprise of the century, honestly, if he goes out there and all of a sudden flip the switch and it's just awesome. But that's one where I think we'll see a big difference for this offense. And I think that's a good challenge. To see okay, you had a week where you had a clean pocket for the most part. And now you have a week where it's probably not going to be so clean throughout the game. And that's where you can see the real development of Caleb Williams in this offense, where maybe they're susceptible to the big plays, but also they're going to be getting after you quite a bit. And we see Washington have some good run success as well. And I'm curious if the Bears will be able to replicate that with Monangai and Swift at all too.
And I'm worried that, as we record this and stream this on a Tuesday, this injury reports come out Wednesday, Thursday. I'm worried Darnell Wright's going to be on there given the time he missed. I know he came back in the game, but he didn't look great after the injury and it seemed to be affecting his play quite a bit. So maybe he's playing through a lot that, after you have some time to recover and the swelling and pain or whatever it's going to be, that there's a risk we go into this game with Braxton Jones and Theo Bennett as your starters, or maybe even, Ozzie Trapillo. You never know. We have neither of your starting tackles against Max Crosby. That could be a real game-changing injury type of situation that I'm really going to be watching closely.
Oh, yeah. And I think Theo Bennett, when he came in this last week, looked good. But again, it's not Max Crosby. And, you are a little more worried about some of the things, at least on that side, than they were Dallas. But I do think you've got I want Darnell Wright to be out there. I do feel like that's going to be a major issue if we're talking about trying to figure out a rotation of what exactly that looks like, because it doesn't. we've talked about it all off season and to the season. Nobody's beat out Braxton Jones. So to me, that feels like you don't have a guy that you trust to be out there if they don't have to be.
What'd you guys make of the Ben Johnson quote when he was asked about Ozzie? And he said, we started him at left tackle. We made the decision that wasn't the best. We made the decision that wasn't the best for him. So we moved him back to the right side. He's coming along. There will be a point this year where he's playing for us. Is that just predicting injury, or do you feel like that's Ben Johnson maybe tipping his hand? Is there a Darnell right tackle flip?
Moved to left tackle.
That was my thought. Is he tipping his hand that they're going to flip tackles this year at some point? Like if Braxton Jones struggles?
I honestly, my mind went there at first, only because I think we've already had the conversation in the past of, should we move Darnell Wright to the other side? That's a conversation we've had honestly since you drafted Darnell Wright. It's been, is he going to play right tackle or left tackle? And you're like, okay, well, he was at his best at right tackle in college, so just keep him here, don't flip him. But I feel like if he has more confidence in a Darnell Wright and, his scheme and, the kind of the gel that the cohesiveness he has in front of Caleb Williams, maybe you throw him to the left and you have Ozzie on the right. That's a big human on your right-hand side. I mean, but we'll see what the rest looks like. I don't know what else that would mean unless if he is just saying, he talked about competition and seeing, pushing some guys, and we saw it this last week, and maybe he meant that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I have to imagine Ben Johnson isn't, right now entering week 4, planning on like, okay, I'm thinking by about, like, he wouldn't have a schedule in his head that, okay, we're gonna bench Braxton Jones in
week 7.
That's not. I don't think he's going into it that saying, well, we're gonna put him in the starting lineup at some point because we're gonna bench our left tackle. I mean, I think he knows that's a possibility for sure. And so I think he's sort of like leaving the door open for a little bit of everything, that maybe they'll bench and move players around. Maybe it'll be an injury and he'll have to be out there, or at a very minimum, he can usurp Theo Bennett in that, swing tackle role and be that 6th offensive lineman and have a role in the offense, but the role is 4 plays as an extra tight end in some goal line situations, and still have been telling the truth the whole time.
Yeah. If there was going to be a change, I mean, I guess it could come quick, because like if you're going to make it, the bye week's probably the week to do it. Which is now right around the corner. It's funny, early in the season, I was like, before when the schedule first came out, and I was like, week 5 bye, like that's kind of tough. I'll be honest, like I think I'm actually feeling better about it. It's like, okay, you struggled for the first 2 weeks. Week 3 goes really well. Let's assume the offense is good again. And then having that week to continue to get better and then really come out of the bye week much stronger, I actually think can work out pretty well for the Bears this year, just for Caleb's development, instead of having to wait all, to week 9 or 10 or whatever it is to get a bye week.
And I think, go ahead, Taylor. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, it's weird timing too, with like Braxton Jones having his best game against Dallas, right?
I know.
We keep looking at like, all right, we're kind of, everyone's looking at the clock wondering when the Braxton Jones thing is just going to fail and they're going to give up and they're going to make a change or whatever. And like, well, he just had a great game. So like now, even if he struggles against the Raiders, like, is that enough to bench him during the bye week? Like, I don't know, like, because you don't want to bench him and then go to a moving different guys around and maybe hurting the offensive line in other ways or having setbacks in other ways. We don't know that Trapillo is going to come in and instantly be better. So like, I feel like it's tough to make a Braxton Jones switch until you really feel like, wow, this guy is really genuinely holding us back and hurting us, that we just need to do something different, as opposed to like, well, he hasn't been as good as we want, so maybe we could do a little bit better if we move things. But like, that doesn't feel strong enough to me to say, all right, let's rearrange at least not the whole offensive line, but make a very huge in-season change to that group.
Yeah, the offensive line, I think, is going to continue to be a fascinating story. I do think that the positive thing that you do want to talk about is Drew Dahlman probably had his best game of the 3 weeks this last week. And we saw the Jonah Jackson improvement from week 1 to week 2. Joe Thuney, I feel like we don't even really have to talk about. He's just, he does what he needs to do. Darnell Wright, we talk about the injury, but outside of that and penalties, I feel like some of the penalties have got to calm down a little bit, but outside of that, he's good. And so you really are just talking about Braxton Jones, and that conversation, is it worth mixing up that if the other 4 are doing their job? If we're getting to week 6, 7 and the other 4 guys, if we're looking at being, okay, top whatever, the top half of tackles and top half of guards in the leagues, and we're talking about I'm sorry, I almost said Trevor Lawrence. Caleb Williams is continuing, and he's not getting pressured a lot, and we're seeing improvement. Do you really want to flip everything and pull Braxton out if the other 4 are doing what they can, and you send some chip help when you have to, and help Braxton when it is somebody like a Max Crosby going against him, and just kind of let the other four do what they need to do. And I wonder, to your point, Lauren, if we're talking about that, if you're talking about week 6, 7, and you're like, okay, the line's actually not terrible. The weakest link is Braxton, but nobody behind him is ready to come in. I think you just kind of rock with it for a little while.
I think I'm gonna throw something at you guys here just as we wrap up the show. We should have probably been doing this from the very get-go, but Bears win this weekend. Yes or no? That's all we need. No score predictions, anything like that. I'm not gonna throw a score prediction on you guys, but I'll go first. I'm gonna say yes, the Bears get the victory this weekend. Move back to 2-2.
I'm going to go yes, too. I just feel like I have to stay positive in this. I noticed this last week when I was going into watching the Detroit game. I felt vibes were off. Like, I remember walking in and being like, I don't feel good about today. And I felt so opposite this week. And everyone kept being like, I think it's going to be a shootout. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm feeling like a good Bears win this weekend. So I'm going to continue that and just say it continues. We go into the bye 2-2 and things are feeling pretty good.
I'm going to reserve the right to change my mind because I haven't had a lot of time to dig into the Raiders yet. But I do think as much as like Marcus Mariota was able to move the ball against them last week, I feel pretty good about the Bears offense being able to find solutions for Max Crosby and keep that rolling. And then I think Geno Smith has struggled against the blitz. So if Dennis Allen can stay aggressive, I think Dennis Allen should be able to hold down Geno and the offense should be able to score. So I'm going to say yes, but I reserve the right to change that opinion this week.
That's fair. It's Tuesday for all of us. There's a lot of time between today and the next game. All right, we'll be back next week for a bye week edition. Hopefully the Bears are 2-2, and I think we'll have to do our head coach villain power rankings since it's going to be the bye week for us. So for Lauren, for Taylor, I am Joe. Thank you guys for watching the Bear Squad Show. Remember, hit that subscribe button here on YouTube, plus wherever you get your podcasts on Apple and Spotify. Make sure you check out Lauren Monday through Friday right here on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel. Thank you all for watching. Talk to you next week. And for the post-game show, we'll talk to you on Sunday. Peace.